Welcome to Conversations with Belle, where we discuss real life issues in a meaningful way. Today, I am so excited that we have Dr. Shawn, licensed professional counselor, here with us, and we are going to be discussing mother wounds. Welcome, Dr. Shawn.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Bill. I'm like, this is a very interesting topic, but one that I'm
Mhm,
very familiar with. So
mhm.
I'm glad you are bringing this to your listeners.
Awesome, awesome. So, if you could just tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and how you came to do this work.
Okay. So I am Rashawn Fuqua, but I practice under Dr. Shawn, the LPC. I've been a licensed professional counselor for 20 years, originally
Mhm.
starting in the Detroit metro area. So I'm from Michigan, and I also practice now in Georgia, where I do all of my practicing online. And for me, and about 4 years ago, I decided to focus on the mother-daughter relationship from my study of Black women and their mothers and the gender roles that they play in the household, whether if you were in a two-parent household versus a single-parent household.
Mhm.
And some interesting things started to come out of that study that made me say there's more here when you have a mother who is pouring into her daughter. What is she actually pouring into her daughter?
Right, right. So, can you tell us in plain language what is a mother wound? What is it?
So a mother wound is usually something that has left an injury that started in an early childhood experience that was left by the mother. Sometimes I say inflicted because sometimes there's intentional hurt.
Mm,
Even in the best efforts, sometimes there is unintentional hurt, and
mhm,
either way it leaves a hole that affects who you are, how you communicate, problem solving, how you see yourself, etc. And so that's where the term mother wound comes from, because it's something that has been done and left by the mother.
How does one identify that they actually have a mother wound? Like, how does that show up?
Ooh, that's a good question. A lot of times it really has to come from just kind of sitting and thinking if it is something that wasn't, more overt. Like I said, sometimes you have some very intentional hurt that is put
Mhm,
on, but a lot of times when you have a wound from, I'll just say childhood,
mhm,
in particular, it is from the caregivers, whatever home you were raised in. And
mhm,
so when you kind of sit and wonder, like, how do I see myself? Something happened in that home, and then it's like, what did the caregivers? And that's what I said. How did they communicate? How did
mhm,
you solve problems? How did you talk about yourself? How was love shown? Nurturing, those kind of things. Money. We start getting into when we start breaking things down. How was finances handled? And so all of those things go back to that home that you were raised in. And so when you kind of sit and think, was the home, there's usually a female figure that
mhm.
is in the home. Not always, but most of the time there is someone that plays that role, and that's what takes us back to the mother room.
So, what really kind of prompted me to talk about this, which it's a conversation I feel like we need to be having because listen, the mother daughter relationship can be complicated, right? It can be
Hmm.
messy. It can be a lot of different things, some
Hmm.
great, some not so great. But it
Hmm.
was really, as I was sharing with you earlier, is when I saw part of that Tyler Perry movie, Divorce in Black, and the portrayal of the mother was she was so horrific. One, I couldn't even believe that she was a real person with those
Hmm.
behaviors. Clearly, she had traumatized her children. And
Hmm.
when I was scrolling through the comments, because I didn't even finish the movie, I lasted maybe 20 minutes. Okay. And that's being generous. But as I was scrolling through the comments, there were so many people co-signing on, that type of mother being a real thing. And so it got me to thinking, how many people are walking around who had mothers that were she was very mean and very her words were very reckless and
Mhm.
she was, yeah, angry, and just clearly she had trauma. And the movie, to my
Mhm.
understanding, never delved into what made her that way. Clearly something did, but it just got me to thinking about how many people are walking around carrying that. And for me, for my own story, I can say I started to unpack some things once I got to college.
Mhm.
And it probably took me 25, 30 years to kind of work through most of the things, that I had experienced, or the thoughts that I had, or the feelings that I had. And so um I also, noticed that that stuff came up in relationships for me,
Mhm.
you know? And so that's why I wanted to have the conversation, because I know so many people that have these messy, complicated, tricky love-hate relationships with their mothers,
Mhm.
and I just felt like we needed to start the conversation, and with as much energy as we give daddy issues, we need to
Mhm.
shine the light on the mama issues. So that's
Mhm.
really what
Mhm.
prompted me to do that. How does it show up in relationships, like in your findings in romantic relationships and partnerships? How does it show up for the mom, for the daughter, or even the mother in their personal romantic relationships?
Oh, well, so first of all, it's a range because it
Yeah.
also depends on what you experience in the household. But a lot of times, what you see with a mother wound is the doubt that is put on the daughter. And what I mean is, your mom is projecting from her own sense of insecurities, and because you have a child, there is an automatic um, power. There's an automatic authority that comes along with that relationship. And so where I have my insecurities, I put that on the child. And so what happens as the daughter goes into her relationships, there's a lot of doubt that she has in herself
Mhm.
that you see. So
Mhm.
that's kind of one of the initial things, but it also can go all the way up to um, a narcissistic mom having a daughter who has a whole nother set of issues on top of the self-doubt, substance abuse. I mean, it just it gets, because
Mhm.
at that point you're trying to mask the hurt. So yeah, it
Mhm.
goes from one extreme to just really just doubting yourself. Things that you might have heard mom say playing in your head,
Mhm.
from you're not good enough to you have to be pretty and have yourself well grown before you got out. This is what you need to do to have a man. So
Mhm.
that doubt is carried with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think the mother-daughter relationship is so complicated sometimes? Why do you think
I
that
use
is?
the word layered.
Layered. Okay.
And we talked offline, because
Mhm.
it's from just my mom and I can't seem to get along and see eye to eye, to
Mhm.
the very extreme, right? Like you mentioned in the movie.
Mhm.
And number one, you literally come from your mother. You come from her womb. You
Yeah.
have her DNA. You also have your father's DNA, but you are experiencing her from an emotional standpoint that you don't experience dad or the father until you take your breath. And so you and mom are connected. So that's why you can even see mother wounds in the terms of, like, in some adoptees, you just like, why do I
Mm.
not feel, or I never feel connected to this family? And they may have been adopted at birth, because there is a actual genetic connection. Okay.
Mhm.
So that's the first thing. And then, as I said, she is usually the nurturer and caregiver. And so what we know in children, from birth in that first year, they need that nurturing in order to begin to develop a healthy sense of self. That's part
Right.
of developmental psychology and developmental understanding. So what was going on in that first year of life with mother, and then we go on and on and on. So yeah, you're connected because you come from her.
Yeah. So a woman, a little girl, woman who grows up in a household who is not nurtured by a mother or mother figure is more likely to present how?
I was gonna say to be hard, angry,
Mhm,
um, emotionalist, emotionally distant,
mhm,
um, very disconnected from herself. And so when I say disconnected from herself, usually it's the mother who is right on the edge, and you get a lot of um, anger or venom in how she talks to anybody, right?
mhm,
It just doesn't have to be her kids, it's the people. So, and there's a garden, a distance, because I have not received the nurturing that helped me be in touch with my emotions. People discount emotions. That might be a whole nother show, of the importance of them and how they help us become attuned to each other.
mhm.
So imagine the person that you are connected to not giving that to you. There's an emptiness, but I still got to live. I still got to function. I still need to work, and I still have the dreams of getting married and being in a relationship. It's an emptiness there.
Yeah,
Hollow.
yeah, yeah. I don't know about growing up in Detroit, right? I didn't grow up there. I grew up in the South. And in the South, you are programmed to speak when spoken to.
Hmm.
You learn to suppress your feelings, your emotions, your opinions, your thoughts. Really don't have them, right? So it's whatever's dished out to you, you sort of just take it, which is
Hmm.
unhealthy. And so I, I wonder if part of that programming is what why do you think we program our children to just kind of take whatever's happening in the household and not push back? Is it laziness on the part of the parent who just doesn't want to deal with it, or is it a real belief that they are doing the right thing by their children, do you think?
Okay, so let's go there because it's a lot deeper than just the
Mhm,
household that you were raised in. So similar in Detroit, it might not have been a yes ma'am or yes sir, but the mother is held in high regard. You speak when
mhm,
you are spoken to. You honor your mother at all costs. You have a mother, so you need to honor her. You came from her. You hear things like you would not be here without her. And so when we talk about the harm that is perpetuated, it is because you have people, Black people, who have been brought to this country. And a lot of times I tell people, Black women have always worked. We never had a break,
mhm,
always worked. So you're carrying that. You took care of somebody else's home. So there was a time that happened. And then you had
mhm.
your own to go into. So I'm tired, but I don't get to be tired.
Right.
I don't get to be sick. So there's this
Mhm,
kind of frustration and anger, or this angst that is kind of carried over, and I got to pretend or just push through. You hear that kind of those kind of words and be
mhm.
okay. And so
Yes.
that kind of creates this cycle. The question that you asked, though, is what happens? The children are in a lower position. As I said, if I'm frustrated, who I get to take it out on? Men usually took it out on the women. The women take it out on the children. You don't necessarily have to
Mhm,
hit your children, but it's like, I'm going to use this control and power that I have in my household. And so it gets smashed down. And I think you as I tell people, I'm from a Black woman. I raised Black women. That's what I studied, Black women. So I can't really speak on other cultures, but I do know for us, we really didn't get that break. And
mhm.
so and to be strong and to push through was what you saw Black women do and pass on to very often to their daughters. And that has been studied. I'm not saying it doesn't happen to men, but
Mhm.
you go to school, you be smart, you don't get pregnant. Like it's just like this thing that you have to do, and if you did anything else, it's an embarrassment, and um you're gonna feel it.
Yeah. Yeah. In your opinion, is there a difference in how mother wounds show up in men versus women?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Similar but yet different. And I think
Mhm.
that goes into just gender and how we allow gender to be played out in society. So what I'm saying is a man isn't allowed to show his feelings. So he goes
Mhm.
with his stuff bottled up. So his issue may come out as aggression, which very often it does. Where
Mhm.
with women, you might see aggression, you might see a passiveness that comes across. You might see it hidden under makeup, shoes, purses, and hair. And I like hair, and I like my shoes and
Me
glasses too.
too.
But sometimes we mask our
Yeah.
pain because we are still moving through the
Yeah.
hurt. And those are the kind of things you see in a woman that you might not necessarily see in a man who's dealing with a mother wound.
Okay. And so if my husband or my significant other, I identify, even if he hasn't, if I identify that he has mother wounds, what is the best way to love that man and support that man? Because it's going to
Mm,
show up. It shows
yes.
up. Yeah.
Yes. Um, I think number one, as I always tell people, starting with self
Hmm.
first is good, because it's always easy to look across the street and point and see what somebody else is doing. So it definitely can show up. We're not saying that it doesn't, but the question is, how can I be that? So, first of all, does that mean you need to have more patience? First of all, does that mean you need to kind of read some books about mother wounds and what behaviors need to be discussed and why other behaviors can be suggested to go to therapy? Because you won't be able to help him or heal him through his mother wound without
Hmm.
training. It just won't happen. And what I tell people is it won't happen is because the real work has to be done. He has to do the work,
Right.
or she has to do the work. Whoever the one is suffering, they have to do the work. But what the partner can do is learn how to be more patient and understanding of what's happening. So when somebody is projecting or dumping on you, it's like, okay, is this me? And usually it is not. Is hurt from unresolved
Yeah.
stuff. And that's why I say emotional baggage. We gonna have to probably come back and talk about that, because that's usually what it is, some emotional bags that need to be unpacked.
Yeah. And sometimes there is no overcoming that, right? So you have to really
Absolutely.
kind of assess who you're with to see if he's going to do the work to heal, so you're not his punching bag, right? Literally or
Absolutely.
figuratively.
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
you can't. That's I told you
Yeah.
you can't do it. You know what I mean? And remember, we talked about there's a spectrum of the mother wound.
Hmm.
So depending on what the person experienced is
Right.
what's coming up. It's the pouring into the cup. You hear people talk
Hmm.
about that all the time. If you got rock, sand, and dirt, broken glass poured in, that's what's going to come out. And so you do have to assess and see, like, if this
Hmm.
situation is good for me, is it safe for me? And sometimes it's not, and it's
Hmm.
like, no, back on up. That's too much of a heavy load to lift. That's not your job.
Yeah. I think sometimes I'm going to speak personally because I cannot speak for everyone else, but I think sometimes I found myself in situations where I connected to that mother wound in him because I date men.
Ooh, yes.
Um, and there was a part of me that was like, I know what that is. And
Hmm.
he didn't feel love from his mother, so let me love him for her,
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
thing. And then you
Hmm.
get
Hmm.
wrapped up into that cycle and
Hmm.
realize is what you said. He has to do the work.
Hmm.
There's no amount of loving and
Hmm.
speaking life into and praying for and
Hmm.
encouraging and soft
Hmm.
place to land nest, that you can
Mhm.
give him, if he doesn't want to do the work. But I do think a lot of
That's
women,
correct.
because by nature we're nurturers, and we
Mhm.
immediately identify that brokenness in someone else, and we're like, let me help soothe that a little bit. I know what that feels like. I know how to,
Mhm.
and rarely do you have a happy ending with that. So I think some women do that. I think for sure some women do that, which is not healthy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
So in therapy, there's the attachment theory.
Mhm.
And so the attachment theory says your wound recognizes the wound in the other person, and then you are attracted to each other
Mhm.
and trying to feel that wound. So if you have somebody that didn't feel seen, I'm a show up for you, but your wound might be I needed more attention. And then you
Mhm.
have this cycle, because if I don't give you the attention that you think you need, now we're arguing, or we're doing tit for tat, or we're keeping score. So it definitely is a real thing where it's an attraction, and you feel like you can
Mhm.
I can do this, because there's also a wound in you. Remember, I said you got to start with self. So if you
Yeah.
notice it, did you do your self work? Did you check
Yeah.
yourself? Have you done your healing?
Yeah. So if I'm watching and I recognize I have mother wounds, what's my first step to healing? What's the
Mm.
first thing I need to do to start the process to heal?
So let's step back. First is to be able to have the awareness, what's going on with me.
Mhm.
Something is going on, because so that's why I said you got to have some self-reflection.
Yeah.
And once you have the awareness, then we go into acknowledging. And there's a couple of ways that you can not acknowledge. You can acknowledge it by working with a professional. You can
Mhm.
acknowledge it by journaling, um, or writing a letter. And I tell people, when you write the letter, this is not a letter to give to your mother. We do not do that. She does not want to hear about all her shortcomings and all of the mean things that she did to you. But the letter becomes a therapeutic piece for you, because it's in you.
Yeah.
There's emotional pain that when you were younger, you might not have even known what you were feeling. But now
Mhm.
that you've had a chance, it was just like, yeah, I felt like I could never do anything right. Or maybe the expectations were too high for what I wanted, or who I want to be. So
Yeah.
that kind of stuff really happens. And what that shows up like is anxiety. It's anxiety in adulthood. So
Mhm.
I would say being able to acknowledge it is that second piece.
Mhm.
The next piece of that is acceptance, because as we talked offline, mother is held in high regard. I am a mother. I have two children I've given birth to, and then there are five children that I help raise, including having children in my home with my husband. So I know about being a mother, and I also have experienced my daughter coming to me and kind of wanted to clear the table, and I was clutching my pearls like, what I what the me, I'm helping people and all of that. And it was my girlfriend, who is also a therapist, who reminded me, was like, let her have her peace,
Mhm.
because you know what you did, and you did the best that you could for who you were in that moment.
Right.
And that was how we were able to make our peace. I didn't try to fight it, but it's hard to even speak and talk about the hurt that is caused by a woman that you love.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
Yeah.
it's those three pieces. It's the awareness, acknowledgement, and the acceptance that this is what this is.
I do that letter thing with anybody that's hurt me that I loved.
Yes,
I
great.
I do that, and like I told you earlier, I get as raw as you can get in the letter, and I
I
get
love it.
everything out so that I'm not holding on to that stuff. And then of course you don't send it to them. Don't text it to the person. Just
Mhm.
write it and I rip it up, but it's out of me is my point. And so,
Exactly.
I really co-sign on doing that. It's very therapeutic and healing, right? Um,
Exactly.
so so our parents are probably boomers, right? Most of the
Hmm.
people that
Hmm.
watch, their parents are probably boomers. So what do we, and that generation is they're resistant. not all,
Mhm,
obviously,
mhm,
but
mhm,
they're
mhm,
resistant to hearing about deficits, right?
mhm.
And
Correct.
so what do I do, or what would someone that's watching do if they attempted to have the conversation with a mother about some things that happened as they were being reared, and the response was anger or indifference or denial. Like, do you how are you supposed to respond to that? What's a healthy way to
Mhm.
respond to that kind of response from your mother once you try to articulate your feelings and your hurt and your pain and your all the stuff you've been carrying for years and years and years? What's a healthy way
Okay,
to
Miss.
handle that?
Okay, Miss Bell. Listen, I'm gonna tell you, I do not recommend that you approach mother at all.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm gonna tell you why. For the very thing you said,
Hmm.
it well. So when because a lot, I do have women. Well, I'm gonna talk with my mother, or you've been in therapy and you learn some things. I think I just got a few questions, and I always say, what is the result you're looking for? Because she might not be
Hmm.
able to give it to you. And is that going to
Right.
cause you more harm? You're in
Hmm.
therapy, you're doing the work now. We just talked about letters. Even if you the letter, there's a book that I'm gonna recommend before we wrap. You can do some things on your own, but this is not for you to approach her. It's
Hmm.
not for you to approach her. Now, if you have a mother that's in therapy herself, that might be a little bit different.
Hmm.
Okay. And so I do work. I got some of my millennials who have moms that are in my generation who are in
Hmm.
therapy. That might be a little bit of different question. Even if you were a boomer mom in therapy, that would really be the only way that I would say start to facilitate the conversation, because that means she's done some healing work.
Some
She's
work.
kind of dealt with some of the stuff that she carried and knew that she passed on. But I really tell people, this is not a conversation to approach mom or any, you mentioned anybody that hurt you, because a lot of times you're going looking for something, you
Hmm.
know.
And they
Now if
can't give
you
it
want
to
to,
you.
they can't. And
They
you
don't have
mentioned the anger, the
it. Hmm.
indifference, silence,
Denial.
denial. It causes
Yeah.
more hurt for you.
Yeah.
Now, what we talk about is how we heal your inner child and how you can parent your inner child. And again,
Hmm.
there's books and things like, if you're not ready for therapy, but I hope people are, you can get help and support with that, of how to heal your own wounds and how to parent your own inner child to heal.
But let's say I decided it's Thanksgiving and I've had a few shots of something
Mhm, mhm,
and I'm feeling a little froggy, right?
mhm,
And I
mhm,
decide I want to jump in the kitchen while mama is, making the mac and cheese,
mhm,
and I emotionally vomit
mhm,
all of
mhm.
that up on her because I just can't hold it any longer and I have got to get it out, right? How do I respond in the moment to a parent who displays those things? That didn't happen. Get out of my face. That's a lie, or tears, or whatever they do to kind of get the heat off themselves. How do you respond in the moment? What's your advice?
Truly, I would say leave the situation.
Leave.
Leave.
Okay.
Yes, you,
Yeah.
and this, but you keep hearing leave, because what will happen is you'll end up with a deeper wound. You'll end up with a deeper wound. That's why I'm saying go to therapy, so you don't find
Hmm.
yourself word vomiting. If you kind of can't hold it anymore, that's your issue. I
Yeah.
know she caused you pain. I know she caused you pain, but at this point, you are an adult that's responsible for your behavior, which is why I
Yeah.
was like, you have to deal with that. You have to unpack that. That's yours to unpack. We're not saying that anything you experienced was small, trivial, or not. Yes, all of that happened, because as I tell people, your truth is your truth. That's the thing
Hmm.
that you're carrying. So let's unpack that in a proper and controlled environment. That's what therapy is for. They can say whatever they want to. Whatever they want to. There's no
Yeah.
judgment, especially
Yeah.
because I deal with the mother wound. I understand. Yeah. So if she don't give you what you need, I'm like, exit. Exit, because it's about to get ugly.
Yeah. Church finger. Church finger. Yeah.
exit. Yeah, I need to leave. Hmm. Hmm.
What if um what if your mother's deceased
Mm,
and there's absolutely no way you could ever have that conversation, or she's not going to ever acknowledge, there's just absolutely no hope that's ever going to happen again, right? What do you do when mom is deceased?
yes. So again, here's another example why we aren't looking for anything from the mother, because sometimes
Mhm.
she's not able to give it to you
Mhm.
because she's not here anymore. And in those situations, that's where the letters really do become mandatory and necessary for the healing, to be able to get those words out. There are exercises that we do in therapy, called the empty chair, where you're able to speak about how to say those things. In the empty chair, it's it's you sharing that. It's very
Mhm.
similar to writing a letter. um I think, if you decide to try to work on this outside of therapy, it's important that you have the proper resources to help you, because even if mom is not here, our goal is to release it off of you and out of you. And you have to be able to tell the story and talk about the things that happened to you.
Mhm.
In fact, sometimes it may even be easier because the guilt, and there is guilt, even
Mhm.
if she's not here or here, and we talk about that, what that is like, and why is there guilt if you're just telling your story.
Mhm.
And so we unpack that first. So it is it's important that you work with somebody, but as I tell you, I do have a book that I'm gonna recommend. I'm gonna tell you the name of the book now.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you've ever heard, it's called Mother Hunger.
Mother
And
hunger.
Mother Hunger is by Kelly McDaniel. And Mother Hunger is the same thing as Mother Wound, but Mother Hunger is how adult daughters can heal from the loss of nurturing, protection, and guidance. And so
Okay.
she goes in there step by step. And she also recommends therapy, but she goes into different types of therapy too. She goes in step by step, because we first talk about acknowledging this. Like, it's like, okay, is this normal? Because some of the things you are experiencing in your current relationship, no, that's not normal. You
Yeah.
dealing with a mother wound. And then she goes into the different ways that you can heal, um, if you're doing it on your own.
Are mommy issues and mother wounds the same thing? Can we use those interchangeably, or is there a distinction?
Um, a lot of times they are used interchangeably, but I think a wound, when, because I use the book Mother Hunger a lot of times for outlining the work that I do.
Mhm.
There is like a mommy issue might be you not being able to say no,
Mhm.
but a wound connects to an ache or a yearning, a missing piece. But a lot of times, not being able to tell mommy no is because of a wound.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, they are a little bit different. A lot of times I look at the mother issue as more what I call surface level things that,
Mhm.
maybe a communication or clarity can be addressed. Just still not able to see yourself as an adult person, adult woman. And so that's where, like, you might see a mommy issue, but the wound is actually a little bit, like I said, a little bit deeper underneath the surface. Just, when you start sitting and thinking about it, it's like some of this not right. Some of this shouldn't have happened to me. There's something missing, or there's an ache there. And that's what the wound is.
Hmm. Is the inability to connect with other women a symptom of a mother wound? Is am I in the right area with
Ooh,
that? Is or is that
ooh.
something else altogether?
It definitely can be connected to the mother wound. Absolutely, 100%.
How
100.
so?
Again, your experiences. in the household that you were raised in, 12 and under,
Mhm.
really it connects to communication, trust. I didn't mention problems, like all of those things you were either directly told about or you learned just from your family system, that household that you were raised in. So if um, you learn not to trust women, you just don't trust women, and
Yeah.
that could have been because of a father who was a person who, you know, slept around, and
Mhm.
how your mom talked about women. So absolutely, absolutely. And then all you need is one experience where it becomes your reality.
Mm. To
Hmm.
reinforce that.
To reinforce it, correct.
Yeah. Some of the meanest when I look back on me growing up, some of the meanest people, they were other little girls.
Hmm.
And, I often sometimes think about that and I'm like, I never had issues with little boys. It was never them making my life a living, what. It was always other little girls who I don't know, but it was them that were like constantly doing mean girl stuff, and I think I often think about them and I think, I wonder what their story was. What were they experiencing at home? What were their wounds? Like what caused you at the age of 10, to be
Hmm.
this little hateful,
Hmm.
angry person?
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I do know some stories of people who were being abused sexually and
Hmm.
otherwise, and so that
Hmm.
manifested itself.
Hmm.
It just made me think about all the little girls that they didn't, they weren't hatched like chickens. That happened to them. Something in that
Hmm.
house, in that relationship, in that home, caused them to be that way. And so I often think about what happened to them. What were they experiencing? Was their experience, similar to mine? um and the bullies, the girls who was I wasn't really bullied,
Hmm.
but the girls who are bullies, or the girls who are very promiscuous at 9, or you
Hmm.
know fighting, or the slick tongue, or the sharp tongue, or they're cussing like sailors, and it's just like
Hmm.
I feel like little black girls are so unprotected, and it really makes me sad when I look back. Now, when I was going through it, I wasn't sympathetic at all. But, as I look back as an adult woman, I'm like,
Hmm.
so unprotected.
Hmm. That's
So
absolutely true.
so unprotected. So, as a mom, because I'm a mother, I have 3 adult sons, 1 left at home. I'm about to be an empty nester. But what are some ways that mothers can safeguard their children, from experiencing the same, the things that they experience, the mothers who have mother wounds? Like, how do we stop ourselves from projecting that onto our children? Like,
Mm.
what are some things we can do or call to our attention, or how do we do
I
that?
think one is I mentioned self-reflection earlier. After encounters happen, because some things are just automatic because it's just been this way. And again, I'm the mother, you won't disrespect me. And I'm not by no means saying that a mother should be disrespected. Um, but when we go into that exchange that you're having with your children, somewhere it's like, well, let me stop. Like, am I trying to build a bridge? Am I trying to be close? Am I trying to connect? Or am I trying to disconnect? I have to go back. So I might have to go back, and I have apologized to my kids because I was like, well, that's not the message that I was trying to communicate. I think you have to, say what is it that I want to do? What kind of adults do I want to raise on an emotional level when it comes to emotional intelligence? A lot of times we just focus on, academics that kind of thing, and intelligence and doing well in school. But there's also emotional intelligence. Do you know what you feel? You know, when you talk about your sons, do they know how they feel? Can they
Mhm.
communicate how they feel? So, having a pathway to be able to have those conversations. And so it might not have started out that way, you
Mhm.
know what I mean? But somewhere along the way I learned, like, I really gotta, allow for more nurturing to
Mhm.
happen. More guidance and support for who they are. So number one, they can trust how they feel. So if they're in a situation where they feel like a young lady or somebody is sucking up all their time, or just, being controlled, and it's like, yeah, I don't know if this is a good relationship
Mhm.
for me. Yeah, it happened with my nephew, and they're young, they're in their young 20s, and it was just like, and I would just ask a couple of questions and he couldn't answer the question. I'm like, well, nephew, you can't answer the question. Maybe you and her need to slow down just a wee bit, just a wee bit. You know what I mean? So I think as a mom, healing from mother wounds, or just trying to do a self check, just start with yourself, and asking, the way that I'm talking to this, is this building, is this connecting? And if not, or knowing that maybe it happened in the past, it's like, let's open the door and open up the door and talk about emotions and feelings and how things make you feel.
Right. I didn't grow up in a house that was we didn't hug and say I love you. That wasn't the house that I grew up in. And I didn't realize that was something I needed until I got into my very first romantic relationship, right?
Mm,
So that's way too late to figure that out. But if you're a woman who struggles with intimacy or being
mhm,
nurturing, loving because that was never shown to you, how do you how do you combat that? How do you fix that?
mm.
What's
Mm, okay. So first of all, we got to go back and realize that we we got a problem. And so you gave a great example that if you are one that doesn't like hugs
Mhm.
or touching, where did that come from?
Mhm.
Just you just asking, so where did that come from? We talked about how Black girls are unprotected. A lot of times
Mhm.
you didn't have a choice in your house about who you were, how you were touched and who touched you.
Yeah.
So you got to ask, where did that come from? And you might say, well, we didn't hug in my household, and I don't need no, I don't, that doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
Um, and what we do know is that if you don't have any touching, it can trigger trauma in the brain,
Mhm.
starting from birth, if you don't have healthy touch. Okay,
Mhm.
so touch is necessary. And so I would just have somebody start asking, anybody that's listening, is that, well, wait a minute. I just don't like people when all of that. And I'm like, when people say that, I'm like, why is that? Where did
Yeah.
that come from? Let's unpack that a little bit. I'm not saying that you have to open up and welcome everybody, but I'm saying
Mhm.
you need to be touched by
Yeah.
another human. There's an exchange of energy that happens. There's an
Mhm.
emotional exchange that needs to happen. And as I said, if you don't get it, they talk about how it creates trauma in the brain.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's a real thing with that. So starting with yourself. You see how everything keeps going back, starting with the self check.
Mhm. But how do I,
Starting-
in practical terms, right? So I'm talking to myself, I'm reflecting, and I'm like,
Mhm,
I freeze up when people, not me personally, but what if I'm saying, I freeze up. I've actually hugged people that froze when
mhm,
I hugged them as if I don't know what they thought I was gonna do, but I'm just, I'm a hugger. I'm a hugger. And
mhm,
so I'm reflecting and I'm realizing that I clam up when someone tries to hug me. But I have, two little daughters and a little son.
mhm,
And when they come to grab, they grab my pants leg and I push them away. And I realize in that moment, I shouldn't have done that. Like, how do
mhm.
I self correct? How do I put into practice doing better with that? Is it, I try to give them one hug a day?
I,
Is it
I would, I
I
would,
gotta
I
hug
was,
them
I
before they go
was,
to
I
bed?
would start with trying to hug them. I would start, but you know what, Bill? I
It
really,
won't matter.
really have to say you have to go to therapy because that's so layered. Remember,
Yeah,
layered. Is
yeah.
it what were you violated as a child?
Mhm,
Because if you violated as a child, me telling you to start with a hug a day, that's again forcing you into a situation that we haven't really fully unpacked and uncovered of why you don't like the hugs anyway. So I
mhm,
really have to get into a space where to have a conversation. And that's where I would say if you go to therapy, please. There's so many ways now that it's accessible, it's affordable. You have people out here where there's organizations giving therapy away for free now.
mhm,
Because for so long that was something that as Black people we didn't have access to, nor did we believe in.
mhm,
And so I would want to talk with that person before I would say. But if you just know that you want to do better, yeah, you would just start by trying to hug, trying to do things differently than you did in the household you grew up with.
mhm.
But I tell people that is not also a end all be all because you need to have balance.
Yeah.
We'll use spankings and whoopings and corporal punishment where I'm not going to hit my kids. That's not going to solve your issue. So
Yeah.
even just giving a hug, why are you giving a hug? Because when you do the exchange of energy, has your heart healed?
Mm.
Now, when I embrace you, you need to feel safe in the embrace. So that's why I'm promoting. You got to do the healing work. You got to go inside and recognize where that is coming from and unpack that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm processing because I'm devil's advocate. I'm thinking, okay, well, what if they don't have resources to go to therapy? Maybe they
We,
don't
we,
have the internet. Maybe they have a
um.
flip phone and they can't do a search.
So let's start with that because I've been advocating for accessibility for about 10 years.
Yeah.
A lot of times in your larger communities, there's community
Mhm.
mental health. So, community mental health, you can access it for free or there's low cost where you can sign up and somebody can come there. You mentioned the internet. A lot of times people
Mhm.
do have the internet and have phones. And so there's all kinds of things on phones. But as I mentioned, there's different organizations, a lot of times in your larger cities, but in rural communities, there's the counties will have community mental health resources to get. So if you're in a more rural area, you can
Mhm.
check out your county that has a community mental health resource. The thing that happened under the Affordable Health Care Act with the Obama administration is they made it mandatory to have
Mhm.
mental health on all insurances. So everybody has to have it if you work
Mhm.
in some capacity, as well as making it accessible and requiring, governmental municipalities to have accessibility to mental health resources. So it's a lot more accessible than people realize. Sometimes you don't
Mhm.
know what's in your area. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I was talk to somebody, please, please.
Therapy.
Mhm.
Therapy. I guess, I'm thinking like in the moment, because if it like it's Sunday evening right now, and if this happens, so then I gotta wait till Monday to call, to schedule. Now it's weeks have
Mhm.
passed, but my little son didn't get his hug. So is it the wrong thing to do to just go ahead and hug, even
No.
if
Oh,
that's not
absolutely not.
something
Absolutely
that,
not.
even if it's
Absolutely.
a stiff church hug, it's a hug. I'm trying,
Absolutely not. I think I would ask that mother,
Mhm.
what is your way to connect?
Yeah.
Because it might not necessarily be the hug. It might be making that grilled cheese and cutting the ends off. And so we'll
Oh.
have a snack before you go to bed. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so it may be me reading your favorite story. So no, it's not wrong. I want to make sure that when people have the physical exchange or the physical touch, that no, it's safe and you feel the
Mhm.
connection, because that's the thing that brings the healing is the connection.
Yeah. I want to talk about briefly because it's heavy. I want to talk about sexual abuse
Mm-hmm.
and mothers who are aware
Mm-hmm.
that their daughter may be being abused, and they
Mm-hmm.
turn a blind eye because, as we talked about earlier, they need a place to stay, or
Mm-hmm.
that's going to keep him or her happy, that whoever they're partnered with. How
Mm-hmm.
does a woman who grew up in a household who has a big gaping wound like that begin to process what happened to her and her mother's, can you heal from that? Like, is it even possible to heal that, to bridge that gap, to be become in, have a healthy relationship with the
Mm-hmm.
mom who turned a blind eye? I know that happens all the time. We see, videos all the time of mothers knowing what's happening and they look the other way. So how does
Mm-hmm.
that person heal?
So, my quick answer is you can heal from that.
Mhm.
I actually do EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is a therapeutic intervention for trauma.
Mm.
And so a lot of times I use EMDR for my trauma victims. I use it for most of my people, but use it for trauma. So yes, there's healing, and they talk about it in the book in Mother Hunger. Um, you also asked the question, could she have a relationship? And so I'm gonna say yes, because there's people out there faking the funk right now, acting like they have a relationship. But what we're trying to do is really promote healing so you can be
Mhm.
whole. And when you have been a woman, well, a child who was violated, and you take that into womanhood without any real healing from it, it definitely will show up even if you never speak of it again. It
Mhm.
shows up. The thing about it is, I tell people the trauma is stored in the body. There's a
Yeah.
memory. There's
Mhm.
another book called The Body Keeps the Score that talks about how your body will hold on to that. And so I would say when you are working through sexual abuse, that it is different things that you have to heal from. It could be trust issues, it could be how you feel about sex, how you feel about yourself, um, just self-esteem, your mother. Like, it's so much to that, that a lot of times it is things that you have to do in steps and in layers. And so for someone who has been sexually violated, I definitely say you have to have therapy.
Mhm.
You can't really get around that, because even if you've done some self work and did some work on your own with, with books, or just, addressing it yourself, even
Mhm.
in church, because I definitely know that healing can be, God can heal any and everything. But I
Mhm.
also know God it had drove me to therapy. And I'm saying I understand that because I know that I'm operating in my gift. And so
Yeah.
you need a safe place to unpack the different layers that come with such a violation. Your
Yeah.
home wasn't safe. So how do
Right.
you feel safe other places? So it
Mhm.
gets pretty deep when you talk about uh, a girl who may have experienced it, and then your mother looked away. It
Mhm.
it you it does something to you. I can't
Mhm.
even really put it into words, because it goes to my root
Yeah.
and made me who I am. Even if I'm one who overshares,
Mhm.
overgives, because I think I don't have any choice.
Yeah.
It's so much to it. So definitely I would say work with somebody,
Mhm.
and that healing is possible. Whole healing.
What about because I know in our community, faith and God is everything, right? For the most part, there are some people who don't believe at all. So h- what would you say to the person who just says, pray about it? Just pray
Um,
about
I would ask them, do they go to the doctor? Do they go to the dentist? Do they go to a teacher? Because if you
Mhm.
answer any of those questions, then you can go to a therapist, because God has created doctors, teachers, dentists. You get your car checked on.
Mhm.
So if you can go and have those, you can have God and you can have a therapist. Absolutely. Different people are gifted for different things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so prayer is actually a part of the healing journey, or your
Mhm.
connection to your higher power, to God. That's part of the healing journey. But you also need physical touch. I just told you, now I don't hug my clients, but I would tell you about the importance of hugging people on your
Absolutely.
healing journey when
Yeah.
you are in therapy, especially when you have been violated physically. But you
Mhm.
can't do that if you don't come to the therapist and understand how the spiritual piece fits into your healing journey as well. It's one part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, you mentioned epigenetics.
I did.
You want to touch on that?
I sure can.
Mhm.
And so we talked offline about the significance of the mother womb. And so epigenetics is something that has been studied in recent years, because what we know and understand with the mother, her trauma is passed on to her child. In fact, um, it goes back to 7 generations, seven. And I didn't
Mhm.
share that part with you, but a lot of times I tell
Okay.
people three, because we can understand mother, daughter, grandmother. And so you pass that on to your child, what you experience. And so what we know is that your DNA does not change genetically, but the cell, which should be round, if you have been in a fight or flight mode, changes shape. Until you have addressed that issue, the shape will pass on to the child that you're carrying, any
Mhm.
child that you're carrying, male or female. The reason why it's significant for the female is that the female receives all the eggs that she will receive in her lifetime when she is
Mhm.
born. She's born with them. So
Yeah.
you're therefore passing that on
Yeah.
to your next generation. And so that's why I talk about healing and the importance of getting with the professional and having somebody that can help work through you. We also know with the epigenetics that you can heal those cells, but that's where your spirituality comes in. That's where touch comes in, and movement, and dealing with things that have lying in the unconscious that have been dormant for years. Oh, there's different elements that come
Mhm.
from a professional side that can help you heal, so you don't pass on those genes, and they can be healed after the children have been born.
Good to know. Last question, I think. What are some examples of boundaries that a woman could put in place to protect her from a toxic mother or an unhealed mother? I don't want to call her toxic, but unhealed
Okay.
mother or
Okay.
narcissistic mother, all the way on the
Okay.
other end of the spectrum. What are some
Yeah.
things you can do as a woman to put in place to protect yourself?
So the first thing I do, so we mentioned like there's a spectrum. So we got this one end and we got the other
Mhm,
end, right?
mhm,
And so if you are in a situation that is unsafe, then
mhm.
you do not have to have contact with the person,
Okay.
period. And I do know what I'm saying. You do not have to have contact. And that's what people have to understand, that sometimes the woman that birthed you can also
Mhm.
be a woman who kills you
Yeah,
spiritually.
yeah.
So if you find yourself and the situation is unsafe, that's the first thing you get. So that's a boundary where you do not have to have contact. The other thing that I would say is that remembering that you are an adult woman on your own healing journey. And so
Mhm,
because you're on your own healing journey, when you bring things, boundaries are designed to keep us safe. And so when you're bringing things into your space, know what you're bringing into your space. And so an example would be, you mentioned like the holidays. If you're deciding to go for the holidays, you don't have to spend a night at the house, or you don't have
mhm,
to stay the entire time. You also can make other plans for the holidays. I know what I'm saying, because people say, "Well, my parents are getting older." That is absolutely right. But what you have to understand is when you take on that negative energy, you're going to put it out,
Yeah.
or it will show up on you physically. And we didn't
Mhm.
even get into how it shows up physically in autoimmune issues, and Black women are leading in lupus. So
Mm.
that kind of stuff, we don't. I have to. No, we are in a healing time
Yeah.
right now in 2024, in this time in our lives. And that's why we talking about this. That's why we ripping band-aids off, pulling curtains down, exposing stuff, because it is time to heal. We are on a healing journey as a people,
Mhm.
women, daughters,
Yeah.
mothers. I'm calling for the healing. And so the boundaries have to keep us safe. That's the first. How do you keep
Mhm.
yourself safe? I don't recommend cutting people off, but I'll say sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
But maybe it's just, maybe I do it in smaller doses. That's the other
Mhm.
end. And doing it because this is what helps me be able to talk to my mom on the telephone. She starts going to the negative. You know what? I got to go to so and so call. You know what I'm saying? It's good. It's good. I'll get back with you. I'll check
Mhm.
on you a little bit later.
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. You wanna touch on, how it shows up in the body since you mentioned it?
Um, so
Some
what
things?
we do,
Yeah.
yeah, what we do know and understand is that when you have been in a fight or flight mode for more than 2 years,
Mhm.
it will, if it does not affect you mentally or emotionally, it will affect you physically, because
Mhm.
all of those parts are connected: mind, body, spirit, and the sexual self. All of them are connected. So what
Yeah.
happens when you don't release that emotional, um I don't, because it's not always pain, but when there's not that emotional release,
Mhm.
it sits in you.
Mhm.
And so if it's not released, you can see how it affects heart,
Mm.
autoimmune issues.
Mhm.
Um, there's like one more. So there's several areas that it actually, emotions can wear on you, that show
Mhm.
up like heart attack and cardiovascular disease and so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
people will focus on that, not realizing that this person had unresolved trauma, because we are focused on the heart issue. But autoimmune issues is actually one of the leading causes of unresolved
Mm.
trauma from a research standpoint.
Okay. So is that something you should probably mention when you go to, you know, your doctor? Because I'm thinking about how Black women are silenced or not listened to. I have a great doctor, a Black woman. She's very in tune. She listens, but not everybody has that kind of physician. So is that
Mhm.
something to consider when I'm going in for my annual, you know,
Absolutely,
physical or?
absolutely. Now more and more doctors are asking about that,
Mhm.
but you also have to have a doctor that, if you answer the question yes, that can give you some resources. But
Yeah.
that's why I love platforms like this,
Mhm.
and talking about, like, if you recognize it before you
Mhm.
even go to your doctor, like, how can I address it? What can I do?
Mhm.
Having a great physician to help and facilitate part of the process is really, really priceless. And there are
Yeah.
doctors out there that,
Yeah.
like I said, are inquiring about the mental health and past trauma, um, the ACEs is adverse childhood experiences, and using tools like that
Mhm.
to tell people, like, you probably want to talk with somebody because of the questions that you answer. So you're
Yeah.
seeing it more and more.
So advocate for yourself when you go to these doctor's appointments. And if your doctor is not receptive, if he or she is not listening, find another doctor. There are tons of them out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Narcissism is a term that's thrown around a lot, right? And I know I can't diagnose. You probably could, but I can't. But it's a term that we hear all the time. It's thrown around a lot. What are some signs, that you may have had a narcissistic mother or that you have a narcissistic
Mhm.
mother?
So a lot of times with narcissism, you see manipulation and the need for
Mhm,
control. And one of the other kind of things that make it hidden is when they deal with people outside of the home, they're
mhm,
very pleasant and
mhm,
charming. So everybody outside the house loves them, but
mhm,
inside the home, there's a lot of control and manipulation
mhm.
and emotional avoidance.
Mm. What do you mean by emotional avoidance?
With no hugs,
Mhm,
um, no crying. You know, she might cry,
mhm,
but you can't. You stop all that noise.
mm,
That kind of thing. Emotions are not welcomed
mhm.
unless they're mine.
And so what do I do with that information if I'm realizing that my mom is in fact a narcissist? Like, is there any repairing that relationship, or do I just move on?
Woo. Um. So I'm gonna say go to therapy again first and foremost,
Of course.
because that relationship um is another one that damages from the root. It
Mhm,
just leaves you with stuff. And the reason why I would say you have to really um create a distance. I won't say move on as an end all be, but create distance is because
mhm.
narcissists do not see themselves as a problem.
Yeah.
Narcissists do not get help. Narcissists will tell you all the reasons why you are the problem and you messed up. So the narcissist is not going to change.
Yeah.
And remember, I said if you need to keep yourself safe, then you cut it off. So sometimes you have to be that um, bold and insistent, like I can't have a relationship because they can't see anybody but themselves. I
Mhm.
don't care that you came from her. I don't, that's and that's the thing that makes my heart hurt because a lot of times I'm dealing with women like that's my mom and
Mhm.
I'm her daughter. Why am I treated like this?
Mhm.
And that's because there's an idea of what a mother should be, and we forget that a lot of women have their own backstories and they flawed and they trying to show up, and when you don't deal with your stuff,
Mhm.
don't deal with your emotional pain, it will show up. That's how you get a narcissistic mother.
And I think a lot of people can't let go of the idea of what they had hoped, their mother would be. They can't let that go. It should have been this, but it was this. And they can't let it go. They can't accept that what they have is what they have, and they
Correct.
will never have the other. And so
Correct.
I think that's part of the hesitancy, for some to let go totally of mothers that are unhealed and are refusing to get help. And so, it's very sad to see. Um, it's very sad to see that, but I know that's part of it. Where can we find you on social media?
So I am on social media on Instagram is Dr. Shawn SHAWN the
Okay.
THELPC.
Hmm.
You also can find me on Facebook under Rasharn, which
Hmm.
is my name after my father, Richard, but it's Rasharn RICHARNE Fuqua.
Okay.
That's my last name,
Mhm.
FUQUA. So from my
You have a
husband.
website?
And I do have a
Okay.
website, and my website is Dr. Shawn the Counselor. So DrShawnThe Counselor COUNSELOR.com. And that's my website if you're interested in services. And so I do see people, as I mentioned, in um, Georgia and in Michigan for
Okay.
therapeutic services, but I do also have a coaching piece where I deal with assertiveness and communication. And so
Hmm.
I actually have women actually all over the nation and some out of the country as well. And so that's a little bit of a more abbreviated, and we work on a specific issue
Hmm.
to help you navigate that as well.
So you are accepting clients.
I am, and
Okay.
this is the first time in a long time, so it's a small window. When I say it's a small window, I stay pretty packed. I shared that with you when we
Yeah.
were talking offline, because of the topic, and I wish I could have given you more of this, but it's such a span in
Hmm.
terms of the narrative, because like I said, sometimes it's just like you feel like your mom doesn't listen to you, and then we kind of
Mm,
go through that, but then we have all of the other things that come in between, that and you being a mom and showing up, so it's a lot of other pieces to it.
yeah.
And so I stay pretty busy, but I
Yeah.
do have a few spaces open on my caseload right now. So people are interested, most insurances are accepted, and cash is always welcome.
Cash is always good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shawn. As I shared with you, I think this is such an important continuing conversation that we need to have in our community because the mother-daughter relationship is so complex. It's beautiful, but it can also be a mess, right? And so
Mhm.
on Conversations with Belle, we want to talk about real life issues in a meaningful way. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. There's going to be other topic. I'm going to keep this going. I feel like we need to keep talking about this and keep talking about it, because it is a real issue within our community. I can be found across all social media outlets. I am Belle Morgan. I also do podcasts every Sunday. We're on Spotify. Thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to talking to you real soon, about real life issues in a meaningful way.